Welcome to the Jiu Jitsu Oracle, where we are going to be talking about the Ruotolo's switch from the ADCC to the Craig Jones Invitational. The biggest switch since LeBron took his talents to South Beach. We've got Calum on the call as always. I'm Ross. We are the Jiu Jitsu Oracle, and we've got helpful graphics provided by Calum's computer. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll get the full experience. If you're listening on Spotify, you'll get all the chat, but minus the graphics. So Calum, Kade and Tye Ruotolo have jumped into the under 80 division in the Craig Jones Invitational. What do you make of the move?
I think this has probably got to be the biggest signing so far. So I think as far as the divisions are concerned, this is the first champion from last year. Obviously, we've got Ffion doing the superfight, but am I right in saying that this is the first champion from last ADCC to come over and do the divisions in Kade?
I think you're right. I'll rack my brain while you continue talking, but I think you're right.
Yeah, so that's huge in and of itself. Two of the biggest stars in the sport, just two massive names as well. I think there's like the factor of these guys are signed to one, and we don't get to see them compete like we used to when they were doing a lot of the WNOs. Don't get to see them compete against some of the top guys in the sport. So I think like once every 2 years when we see these guys jump into ADCC and face the cream of the crop in their divisions, that's like a really cool thing. So now that is not the case and they'll be facing the guys in CJI, that's a massive thing as well. But after this move, it really got me thinking, is CJI bigger now than ADCC? Not saying that that's the case, but that's definitely what it's got me thinking. And I think I would be comfortable saying that, for me anyway, out of all the divisions, so like CJI's 2 divisions and then all of the divisions in ADCC, it looks like under 80 kilos is shaping up to be the biggest division out of all of them.
Okay, so let's take those 2 points that you have made and delve a little bit deeper into them. So first off, is CJI now bigger and better than ADCC? Well, I'm going to say where the superstars are is first and foremost what matters. And the ADCC still has Gordon Ryan, Mica Galvao, and Nicholas Meregali. And I think they are arguably the 3 biggest stars in the sport. Well, to be fair, Craig Jones Invitational has Craig Jones.
Yeah.
So he's in and amongst that group as well. I think Gordon is by far and away the biggest star in the sport, the biggest needle mover. And then who else makes up the podium for club superstar remains to be seen. But I do think...
A big name as well. He's going to be in CJI.
Who's that, sorry?
Nicky Rod, pretty big name as well.
Nicky Rod's a big name, big dude. But I think where Gordon is the big show. You know, Gordon is the Hulk Hogan, the Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Rock, the John Cena, like whatever like massive wrestling superstar there is at that time. Where that person is the big show. So I think from that point of view, ADCC is still ahead, but much like the Boston Celtics, Calum, CJI is building a hell of a team to rival the ADCC's big 3, as it were. So, another basketball reference. You can tell we've been watching the NBA playoffs recently, eh? So, it's certainly a discussion point. I wonder, do you think there's a sign-in that could put CJI definitely over the top?
I think the interesting thing is, obviously, Team New Wave, none of those guys are going to be jumping over just because of the feud. And then, like you say, the biggest star, Gordon, he's probably the least likely to jump over. And as well, we've got Meregali from New Wave as well. So those guys are kind of locked in. And then as well, you mentioned Mica as being one of the biggest stars here. So as you can see in this post, Mica commented disappointed, presuming he wanted that rematch against Kade. And the comment has been a bit lost in all the replies. But Craig Jones replied to that, we've still got 1 space if you want it. So I think Mica jumping over would definitely solidify the under 80 kilo division as being the best division, and CJI being better from the standpoint of the lower weight classes. But I think for the upper weight classes, a big sign-in would be someone like Kynan moving over. That would be really big. I think someone like Buchecha jumping in, which I feel like I've heard some rumours through the grapevine, but nothing really confirmed as of yet. So I think one of those guys jumping over, a guy like Buchecha who's not really in the sport too much, or a guy like Kynan who's top of the sport, would be pretty big. But I think from the perspective of like the higher weight classes, they've definitely got some of those top stars locked in.
Felipe Pena as well would be a big one if they could get it. And obviously that would be a little bit of a hit to ADCC, because I think if we do get that Pena against Gordon rematch, that'll drive a lot of interest. So definitely like Kynan and Pena, they're two big names that CJI could go after, and if they did switch, like that would be also big news. Let's just delve in a little bit of the history of the Ruotolos, Calum, just to let people know why we think it's such a big deal that they've made the switch.
Yep.
Can you outline some of their credentials for us, please?
Yeah, so Kade, obviously last ADCC, he managed to win the 77 kilo bracket, winning all of his matches by submission, taking out Mica in the final, who's obviously one of the biggest names in the sport, taking out some other really big guys, big names like Lachlan Giles and Roberto Jimenez. Tye, a bit of an upset. He was one of the favourites for the 88 kilo division, but he got put out by his teammate Josh Hinger, but then had one of the best absolute performances, beating Pedro Mourinho, beating Felipe Pena, and then for me, the match of the event was him versus Nicholas Meregali, and just an absolute scrap. So that was a great performance in the last ADCC. But before that, as they were kind of like maturing into black belt, they were just killing it on the sub-only scene. So there was a WNO card where there was a 155 tournament and 185 tournament for the belts, and Kade won the 155 and Tye won the 185, Tye beating Mica in the final of that. So around that stretch, kind of leading up to ADCC before they got signed by ONE, they were just like killing it in all the sub-only shows. Obviously they've been signed to ONE, and now we get to see them in a bit more limited of a fashion against some guys that aren't really grapplers. Some of them are MMA fighters, and some of them are really good grapplers. Like we've seen Tye beat guys like Isaac Michel recently, and then Kade beating guys like Tommy Langacker recently. So just overall really good credentials.
Okay. Tye also IBJJF World Champ at Black Belt in the gi in 2022.
Yeah, I think another point on that, so black belt world champion, but as well brown belt world champion, and the guy that Tye beat in the finals to win the brown belt gi world champion was his brother Kade, and it was definitely a real match. They were really going for each other. So they're both doing this under 80 kilo division, and apparently they're going to get put on opposite sides of the bracket. So if those two meet in the final, at least we know that that is going to be a real fight, and I think these two getting put on opposite sides of the brackets and meeting in the final is a very, very realistic possibility.
But we will give our views on who is going to make the final when we do our tier lists, won't we, Calum?
Yeah.
So there's a little tease to keep following the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. But in an interview with Ariel Helwani, Kade said they would be on either side of the bracket. He also said a couple of deciding factors for the guys, and they had been weighing up which competition to do. One was obviously the money, because there's a $1 million first prize for both weight classes. And then there's the factor of the weight cut and the weigh-ins. And ADCC, I believe, has changed the way they're doing it this year. Am I right, Cal?
Yeah, so it's obviously over 2 days. And then I believe they would have had to weigh in like on the day on the first day and then on the day on the second day. So it's not like IBJJF Worlds, for example, which is also over 2 days for the black belt, so they could do a big weight cut, weigh in on the day, potentially get a couple easy matches first round, and then when they have their hard matches on the second day, they're like 20 pounds heavier. That wasn't the case for ADCC. They had to make weight every day they were competing. It was announced by Mo for the first trials that they would be doing day before weigh-ins, and that would just be you weighed in, and then you could rehydrate, refuel for the day, and then it was announced that they're going to be doing that for Worlds as well, I believe. So Tye, who is doing the 88 kilo division usually, who's very much undersized for that weight class, that obviously won't be great for him to hear, because you'll have guys cutting down from mid to high 90 kilos, so he is very small for that weight class. Obviously he's making the under 80 kilos, so I think that was a big factor in his decision to move over.
Yeah, and then as you said, they're going to be on either side of the bracket, and I think ADCC encourages people who are on the same team to face each other very, very early on, so we don't get the situation where they play off in the final and it's either not a great match, or there might be some sort of agreement in place that one guy wins and one guy doesn't. Or I don't actually know what the situation is in the ADCC, but you know, there's the closeout situation that can happen as well, that we often see in grappling tournaments. So Kade and Tye have shown with their brown belt match that they are absolutely willing to have a scrap against each other. I think off the top of my head, probably Kade had the better of the match for most of it, and then Tye caught a submission later on.
Yeah, and I think these guys will split the money. It looks like they do a lot of things together. They're opening up their own gym together in Costa Rica, but we know that they are very competitive against each other and they hate losing to each other. So even though they'll probably split the money, whoever wins, if they do face in the final, just for kind of like that brotherly competitiveness, we know that they're going to be gunning for each other in that match.
Yes. Now, we're talking about the Ruotolos, so can we just flag up a couple of matches that the Ruotolos are going to have in the future, both under the one banner, and that is Tye is going to have a match against Joseph Chen, and Kade is going to have a match against Mikey Musumeci. Calum, what do you think of those matches?
Yeah, so like I spoke about a few minutes ago, when Kade and Tye were killing it in all the sub-only shows, they had that tournament on WNO where they both won their divisions, and Kade won the 155 division. Everyone was suspecting that the final of that, they were on opposite sides of the bracket, was going to be Mikey versus Kade. That was the one that Gabriel Souza shocked everyone and beat Mikey. Around that time, Mikey had a lot of aura around him. Everyone was expecting him to be the favourite for the division alongside Kade. So that was a match everyone was looking forward to seeing in the final that we never got to see. Kade was pretty big for the weight class then, but I'm sure is even bigger now. So I'm sure there's a big size discrepancy between this. But I'm very excited to see that match that we never got to see a few years ago. Very interesting stylistically. I think it's almost a certainty that we're going to see Mikey playing guard and Kade on top looking to pass. Big difference in physicality and size, I think, but both super technical grapplers. So I'm really excited to watch this one.
Yeah, and as Kade tries to pass, the style he plays on top could force Mikey to come to top. The way Cade's happy to dive on scrambles and dive in scrambles, going towards the back, going towards the head, etc. So it might be different to what we often see in a Mikey match, where Mikey's very much on bottom for the most part, often trying to get into the legs.
I think the passing style's an interesting one, because we see Kade passing on the outside a lot and not liking to get entangled up. Mikey has very good kind of K-guard entries into the legs, very good choi bars. So in a way, that kind of is good for Mikey to maybe snatch up some of those things, but kind of a bigger version of Mikey, Lachlan Giles. We saw how that match went at ADCC, and Kade was pretty comfortable defending against those attacks and then counter-attacking off of that. So I kind of see some parallels between Cade's match and Lachlan's match just stylistically. I kind of see Lachlan as just like a bigger version of Mica in many ways.
Cade's counterability means that he's incredibly tough matchup for absolutely anyone, because it doesn't really matter where you get him. He's got the ability to not just survive in the position, not just get out of the position, but use it to very quickly attack. So, if Mikey gets in on Kade, that the match has still got a long, long way to go from that point.
Yeah.
And we have Tye also in action going up against Joseph Chen, which is another interesting style matchup, I think.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, I think. Kind of similar to what we spoke about on the last episode when we were talking about Elijah Dorsey versus Joseph Chen. I think they will both be trying to get on top. I think if Joseph does get on top of Tye, he has got the potential to pass his guard. I think he is going to struggle to do that, though. I think at this moment in time, Tye is a much higher caliber of grappler than Joseph, and just given the parallels of what we saw with Tye versus Isaac in their most recent match, and then Isaac versus Joseph Chen, looking like it's going to be a very, very difficult match for Joseph Chen to come out on top of, but I'm still looking forward to seeing it for sure.
And amazing for Joseph to be now at this place where he's getting invited onto shows like one, because it's not really been that long where he's been on the elite competitive stage. So great to see him.
Yeah, kind of thing you brought up there about it being one of the top shows. I just kind of think what would be viewed as more prestigious, getting invited onto one for a match or getting invited onto WNO, because I think they're the two biggest super fight shows for jiu-jitsu. Obviously one not just being a jiu-jitsu event, but I think those are kind of the two top ones that we're seeing Joseph in both of them at the moment, but potentially one just because of the scope of the audience and the potential for that big bonus as well.
I think one is kind of the Ruotolo Invitational now, and Mikey's in there as well, but a lot of the big grappling matches revolve around those guys. WNO, obviously, and there's Fight Pass Invitational as well.
Yeah,
has a sort of wider scope in the card they put together, but then, like, especially with WNO, you'll see Gordon on those shows. So, like, if you get a match against Gordon, that's huge. Or if you're on a prominent position on the card and Gordon's competing on it, that's huge. Fight Pass, again, like with the UFC tie-in, very prestigious show to be involved in. And it's great that like One and UFC are taking an interest in these, in submission grappling and putting events on. But yeah, very prestigious for like Joseph to like get a shout for One and get a match against Tye. I agree. Tye's kind of like more experienced, been at this level for longer, tough nut to crack, tough guy to like get a hold of and get into a position where you can win. But really interesting to see like the durability of Joseph and the possible problems he can pose. Now, while we have talked a lot about the Ruotolos, just before the Ruotolos made the switch from ADCC to CJI, the Craig Jones Invitational had another huge match announcement, and that was the opponent for Ffion Davies, and we're waiting to see who it would be, and it was announced as being Mackenzie Dern. So, Mackenzie Dern, current UFC star, previous grappling star. Calum, what do you make of the matchup that Ffion is going to face?
Yeah, I think the title of this post is very valid. Might be the biggest female super fight in jiu-jitsu history. To be honest, just from watching her grappling, Mackenzie Dern is a little bit before my time. I started training in 2016. Obviously, she won ADCC in 2015 and then transitioned over to MMA. So I've seen clips here and there, but I'm not super familiar with her pure grappling style, although obviously she's of a very high pedigree, winning ADCC. So it'll be interesting to see that kind of clash of how good are the champions from back then versus now, as well. How big of a factor is it that she's now an MMA fighter? Will that help her in the fact that, you know, it's a very athletic sport? She's obviously had to take her training very seriously from that, or will it hinder her in the fact that she's maybe not as up to date with some of the newer grappling techniques? So I think from that perspective, it's very interesting. Obviously, a lot more familiar with Ffion Davies. Watched her a lot through the past few years. She's obviously the top female grappler in the world right now. So very big matchup from just kind of like a name perspective. Did you watch Mackenzie Dern a little bit more when she was on the scene? I know that was obviously of your time as well when you were still grappling.
Is that shade or is that credit for the amount of time I've been in the game, Calum? Credit. Yeah, Mackenzie, this is interesting to me, right? When she was competing, and it was 2015, she was ADCC champ and also IBJJF Worlds champ. She's very, very good at open guard. Now, since that time, she's obviously gone into UFC and MMA. So it's like her game's different because she's playing a different sport, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking, right, back when I watched Mackenzie, saw her play a lot open guard very, very well. Now, the other, so will that have changed across the 9 years now that she's been doing, well, since her victories there and, you know, moving over to MMA. Also, Fion's strongest suit, I would say, is her guard passing.
Yeah.
So it's like, if Mackenzie's on bottom against Ffion, which could well happen, Ffion as well, with her judo background, very good on the feet, very good throws. But then Mackenzie moving into MMA, she's got more skill on the feet than she did when she was a grappler and she played off her butt a lot. So it's like, it's an interesting match. Like, I'm trying to work out what I tend to think we'll see Ffion top, Mackenzie on bottom. I tend to think like we will see spells of like a lot on the feet. And yeah, if Mackenzie's on bottom, like I don't know kind of like what guard game to expect because it's been so long. Well, will she like revert to default and we'll see a lot of classic Mackenzie from like we saw back in the day, or will she be like more inclined to wrestle? It's a really interesting style matchup, which, you know, not just is it an intriguing matchup from the two names involved, the caliber of the athlete and the star status of both of them, but it's an intriguing style matchup, and I'm unsure as to like what exactly we're going to get.
Yeah,
so
I think as well, maybe flown under the radar a bit compared to other kind of elements of the game that have advanced. So like jumping from 2015 to now, where you'd probably think of like leg lock advancements in the stand-up. I think the guard passing generally has advanced like a ton as well, especially in no-gi, where that is becoming some people's focus, and it's not just like taking gi techniques and then trying to modify them to the no-gi. There's like very much its own thing now. No-gi's got its own systems of guard passing, so it'll be interesting to see from that perspective if she plays like a game that she played in 2015, how that stacks up against the modern no-gi guard passing game that we see Ffion using.
Yeah, and I think Fion's guard passing game, there is a lot to it, but then like if you're going to put your money on like what pass she'll get to like solidify the position, it's going to be a knee cut, right? So then that's not going to be something that like Mackenzie's not had to deal with in her time. So, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that would be Fion's strongest passing movement that leads to a pin. But then, even if guys do have good knee cut defense, we've seen Ffion be able to like blast through and score off it. So, a really interesting style matchup, and obviously two very big names in the sport. So another feather in the cap of CJI. It's almost like, Calum, it's almost like we're going away to train jiu-jitsu in Manchester. The wrong time, because something's going to happen over this weekend and another massive superstar is going to get announced to compete somewhere.
Yeah,
But
undoubtedly.
for now, we're going to enjoy the Who's Number One event. We're going to keep our tabs on what's happening in the ADCC and CJI events. And we'll be back with another Jiu Jitsu Oracle in the middle of next week, once we've had a chance to get back and get caught up on everything that's going on. So until then, this was just a bonus Oracle on the news that the Ruotolos have switched over from ADCC to CJI, and Mackenzie Dern has also joined CJI. So is CJI now the biggest and best grappling tournament happening in mid-August? You let us know, give us a comment, and any good comments we'll read out on the next edition of the Jiu Jitsu Oracle.